Bonjour et bienvenue.
Hello and welcome. I am Richard Simmons, Director of the French Services of Radio-Canada for Acadia. Bienvenue.
Does fourth annual public meeting live from the Rooms Theatre in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. I extend a warm welcome to the people across Canada tuning in live on the web, on Twitter, and here in St. John's. J'aimerais souligner la présence des membres de l'équipe.
I'd like to underline the presence of the members of the team of the management of CBC and also members of the board of directors. Certain amongst them have been invited to answer your questions after.
The chair of the board, Rémi Racine, the president and CEO of CBC Radio-Canada, Hubert Lacroix, and the vice president and chief financial officer, Susan Morris, will review highlights of the past year and provide an overview of the corporation's directions for the future. We also have the pleasure of having with us four CBC and Radio-Canada journalists, Adrian Arsenault, David Cochran, Céline Galipeau, and Tom Harrington. They'll join us in the second half of the event for a discussion on a couple of themes relating to the role of the public broadcaster. A question period will follow the panel discussion. We'll be taking questions live from the floor and via email and Twitter. For those of you online, I invite you to start sending in your questions right away. Simply go to the question field at the bottom of the web player to send us your questions. For those of you on Twitter, use the hashtag CBCAPM et en français RCAPA. Avant de commencer, j'aimerais vous inviter à regarder.
I would like to invite you to look at a video which gives you a good idea of what we're doing in CBC. We're going to set a video.
Range of services we provide to Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Please enjoy.
CBC Radio-Canada.
Television, radio, digital.
Ce soir, c'est extrême.
Continuing to lead.
This is your network, CBC News Ottawa.
Pour offrir un contenu auquel les auditoires ont accès, à leur convenance. CBC Radio-Canada, une programmation pour et sur les Canadiens.
As we build on our success, sharing from coast to coast to coast, our stories, our conversations.
I mean, who in the right mind thinks that every religion is equal?
Yes, but you're not normal.
On air, online, and mobile.
Excuse-moi, Gabriel. Je te présente Francis Saint-Pierre.
Pour témoigner clairement de nos différences.
Ils ont 1 million à investir. Qui saura les séduire? Qui saura s'enrichir?
Like Arctic Air, set in Yellowknife, starring Adam Beach. And Eighth Fire, a 4-part television event, along with original programming on radio and online, about Canada's First Peoples and how they are redefining their relationship with us and the world. Projects like the Hamilton Station.
Et le lancement des services Rive-Nord et Rive-Sud de Montréal de Radio-Canada illustre notre nouvelle approche locale en tirant avantage des nouvelles technologies de communication.
There are no geographical or technological barriers.
C'est le grand retour de la production du téléjournal dans l'Est du Québec, dans la toute nouvelle maison de l'Est à Rimouski.
As a public broadcaster, it is imperative for us to bring the power of all our assets, broadcast, digital, and our stars.
Combinés autour de grands événements qui favorisent la sensibilisation à des enjeux nous concernant tous. Comme la boussole électorale.
A one-of-a-kind interactive online tool that helps voters make a more informed decision at the polls.
Vivez mieux.
A rich digital initiative to support better nutrition and health.
Voilà la réussite de CBC Radio-Canada en matière de diversité. Nous tirons profit de toute la puissance de l'ensemble de nos plateformes en français.
Je veux te parler.
And English. We inspired readers around the country through Canada Reads, the country's annual Battle of the Books.
Les 5 livres en nomination ont été écrits par des auteurs qui vivent en milieu francophone minoritaire.
For more than 10 years, we brought Canadians Hockey Day in Canada, partnering with Participaction to bring every Canadian CBC Sports Day. And we opened our doors to kids of all ages for CBC Kids Day. We sponsored Culture Days.
Et les Journées de la culture.
this 3-day celebration of arts, culture, and community.
Lors de notre journée porte ouverte, les Canadiens de toutes les régions ont pu venir nous rencontrer et découvrir les coulisses de CBC Radio-Canada. Radio-Canada et CBC ont réalisé ensemble de grands événements, comme la retransmission en direct et sur toutes les plateformes d'un concert de l'Orchestre symphonique de Montréal.
This is CBC, using the power of all our platforms to inspire, to connect all Canadians.
CBC Radio-Canada, véritable chef de file, pour inspirer et rassembler tous les Canadiens, à l'image de notre pays et de notre expérience commune.
Everyone, every way.
Partout, pour tous.
And on that great note, please welcome Rémi Racine, Chairman of the Board of Directors of CBC Radio-Canada.
Thank you. Good day to you all in St. John, Newfoundland, and to many more attending the meeting via webcast and following us on Twitter across the country. Welcome to CBC Radio-Canada 4th Annual Meeting, public meeting. En tant que président du conseil d'administration,
President of the Board of It is an honor to address myself to you in the name of the board and of all of those in CBC Radio Canada. With us today, there are members of the team of the board and of the management, as well as new members, Terelia Emanilakan. The council is responsible to make sure that everyone in Canada is the public annual meeting is one of the most important elements as far as responsibility of CBC in the heart of our message as far as for our country.
5-year strategic plan, Everyone, Every Way, we committed to reporting to Canadians twice a year across a range of metrics. The final report for 2011 and 12 is now available on our corporate website, cbc.ca, radio-canada.ca. En ce qui a trait aux obligations de la société en vertu de la loi sur l'accès à l'information,
the obligation of the society for 2001, according the number of requests has
compared to 80.5% in 2007-2008. All that shows the serious that this corporation grants to this question. Cet événement
opportunity to connect with you and exchange ideas about the national broadcaster. Ideas like, how do we make room for different opinions on our platforms? It is one of the board's objectives to ensure that your public broadcaster reflects this country's various points of view on a wide range of issues that are in the interest of Canadians. It is, after all, our promise to create public spaces when you can better understand and relate to the world, to Canada, your province, your city, your community, and your neighbors, while definitely expressing your opinion and sharing your experience and ideas. At the same time, the board, along with the rest of the corporation, must remain mindful of our financial context and the evolving nature of media technology. The board has the responsibility to keep asking the right question to management to ensure that the corporation continues to streamline process and reduce cost, all with the goal of being as efficient as possible and of investing the maximum in creating content. Before I make way for the CBC President and CEO, I would like, on behalf of the board, to express admiration and thanks to the outgoing chair, Tim Casgrain, for leading the board in his 5-year term. I want to convey my gratitude to my colleagues on the board for their valuable contribution and enduring commitment to the national broadcaster. Thank you also to the CBC Radio-Canada employees for their commitment to the corporation's mission of delivering great content despite the challenges we face. Enfin, je remercie les Canadiens.
I thank the Canadians who continue to support and encourage CBC Radio-Canada. The reason of being of this corporation is to offer you its services, to present stories which are yours, and to make sure that you can have yourself a place in this mediatic countryside of which you can be proud. Now, so it's with a lot of pleasure that I want to present to you the CEO and President of CBC Radio-Canada, Hubert Lacroix.
hello, everybody. Thank you, Rémi, and thank you for all of you attending with me on the web.
At CBC Radio-Canada, this past year was all about our 5-year strategy. 2015, everyone, every way, and its implementation across the country. It was about being more distinctively Canadian, more regional, and more digital. When we launched this plan 2 years ago, questions were raised about local weekend news and whether we saw that part of our strategy. Well, here we are, 2 years later, delivering new weekend news and late-night news on television, on radio, and online in places like Montreal, Ottawa, Edmonton, the North, and here in St. John's. For you here, and for the rest of Newfoundland and Labrador, this has meant growing On Point, a show about local newsmakers and politics that launched during the 2011 election campaign. Hosted by David Cochrane, who you'll see in a few minutes joining us in our panel discussion, On Point now includes a weekly 20-minute spot on TV and a half-hour radio call-in show on Friday afternoons. Aujourd'hui, nous offrons aux Canadiens plus de 30 services.
Canadians, more 30 services with contents, which is going to go from classical music with programs for children, with also reality TV and also arts theatre arts.
Despite all of our progress, all of our achievements, and our focus on delivering on the promises that we set out in Strategy 2015, we continue to face a variety of challenges, from regulatory to financial. The first of these challenges is the very ecosystem in which we operate. Back in 2008, vertical integration was mainly limited to boardroom conversations. The Canadian mediascape was still comprised of many independent companies spread across different media segments. Not anymore. Today, the vast majority of media content in Canada is controlled by 4 corporations: Bell, Rogers, Shaw, and Québecor, who have massive influence on our broadcasting system and dominant market power. Together, they control almost 85% of the entire television market. In fact, these 4, plus TELUS, control 83% of all broadcasting and telecom revenues. And if Bell's bid to buy Astral Media is successful, Bell will control 36% of conventional TV revenues, according to the CRTC's latest report. That's more than twice the amount of its largest competitor. And on the radio side, their control would amount to 31%. We're not saying that this is bad or that this is good. We're simply giving you facts. So, these facts, these percentages, and these numbers, what do they mean to you in this room and to Canadians that are listening to us today? Well, they tell us that the diversity and ranges of voices in Canadian media is at stake. And that's something that everyone in this room should care about. Despite the almost unlimited quantity and choice of content available, there is little of it that is Canadian when it comes to English television, and very little of the rest is free from a small number of commercial agendas. And that's where the public broadcaster comes in. That's where we come in. In this slide, please look at it, which shows CBC, CTV's, and Global's primetime television schedules from this season. The red blocks are Canadian programming, and the blue blocks aren't. We've shown this slide at previous annual public meetings because this needs to be talked about and this needs to be understood. This is where CBC Radio-Canada stands out. We own the red blocks. And we don't do it because it's a CRTC requirement in a benefits package imposed on us in the context of the closing of a deal or of a merger. We do it because we believe that Canadian programming is at the core of our mandate. Oui, les émissions.
Yes, the Canadian programs cost a lot. So why do we continue to produce them? Because a big country, diversified, whose population is dispersed everywhere geographically, who doesn't have the means to tell its own stories, share its common experiences, debate its different issues, doesn't stay united for a long time. Television and radio are not perhaps the only means to bring Canadians together. They're surely, for the moment, the most efficacious or effective and economical means to do it.
The challenge is financial in nature, and that won't surprise you. But here's what we are doing about it. As most of you know, our appropriations were reduced by $115 million over 3 years, and when you add on unavoidable cost increases and the investments that we require in order to transform ourselves into a modern public broadcaster, our challenge is then a budget reduction of $200 million over 3 years, plus a one-time hit of $25 million for severance. And the CRTC's decision in July to eliminate support for local television programming by discontinuing the Local Programming Improvement Fund, that everybody refers to as the LPIF, obviously adds to our financial challenges. As for the justification of eliminating the $2.17 LPIF monthly charge on my cable bill in order to lower costs for consumers, I'm not sure that it works for me, given the fact that I just received a notice from my cable company informing me that the cost of their service is going up $1.99 a month for the second time in 6 months. This time they say that it's about programming costs and an increase in the cost of their digital equipment. So much for my cable bill. Yet, improving local service is one of CBC Radio-Canada's top priorities, as you'll remember from my opening statements a few seconds ago. This CRTC decision doesn't change that. But there is no question that it will negatively affect overall local television program in smaller markets.
Up to now, we have set up a certain number of other solutions to face up to our financial challenges. We have, for example, completely transformed Radio-Canada International, which now broadcasts only on the web in 5 languages: French, English, Spanish, Arab, and Mandarin. On the 24th of June, which was it marked the end of transmission on short waves of our service of international radio. Nous avons aussi
July 31st, all of our 620 analog TV transmitters, including several here in Newfoundland. Unfortunately, in a few places around this province and in other provinces in this country, the shutdown affected more than simply antenna users. In August, we were copied on a letter sent to the CRTC by one of Newfoundland's MHAs, Mr. Jim Bennett from St. Barb, who stated his concern that some subscribers to Eastlink in Western Newfoundland and Labrador lost access to local CBC programming. We are well aware of this problem, and please know that it is only temporary. We're working hard right now with Eastlink, and the situation will be resolved in January. And by the way, we thank you for your patience with this situation. In August, we also announced the sale of Bold, one of our few specialty channels, and we canceled the development of 3 others. We are also reducing the range of programming in music, in sports, and even in news. And we are now aiming to decrease our real estate footprint by at least 800,000 square feet by 2017. Our next week, though, will be about our license renewals that are set to begin on November 19th. Canadians now have an opportunity to remind the CRTC of the importance of the Canadian program we bring to you and of the other services we render. It's been 13 years since our licenses were reviewed. It's about time. While Strategy 2015 sets out the vision for the future of CBC Radio-Canada, we need a regulatory framework that will enable our progress and that will allow us to maintain our presence no matter what degree of consolidation happens around us or how fast technology and demographics change. So with that said, let's turn over to numbers and to Suzanne Maurice, our CFO.
Merci Hubert. Hello everyone.
Herbert, bonjour tout le monde. It's with pleasure that I'm here today to present a brief summary of our financials of our budget and what we have, and also this financial year. So last year,
increased by 26.6 million, or 4%. Advertising revenues were up, primarily due to a strong TV schedule, to a strong hockey playoff season, and revenue from special event coverage that included the federal elections. Digital advertising revenues also increased, notably as the result of the success of our TouTV platform. Specialty service revenues were also up compared to the previous year, with ad revenue growing on the strong performance of our news networks and subscriber revenue also increasing. Operating expenses were higher by $6.6 million. That's 0.4% compared to the previous year. This increase largely reflects one-time costs for various efficiency-generating projects, as well as digital and local service initiatives consistent with our Strategy 2015 plan. Government funding decreased by $5 million, and this was mainly due to an incremental budget reduction tied to cost containment measures announced back in the 2007 federal budget. That was last year. So far this fiscal year, CBC Radio-Canada has been dealing with significant financial challenges. Hubert outlined some of the measures that we're taking to address these pressures. Let's have a look at how these are affecting our results and at how our revenues have been performing so far this year. First, our revenue performance. In the first quarter of 12-13, overall revenues were up $2.6 million compared to the same quarter in the previous year. Digital revenues, facility rentals increased, as did growth in subscription, with more subscribers moving from analog transmission. These increases were partially offset by lower hockey playoff revenues. You'll remember the Canucks 7-game playoff run back in 2011, which hit a viewership high. As we hit the halfway point in our fiscal year, revenues are on track for the first 6 months. Our expenses increased in the first quarter due to restructuring costs in 2 areas. First, we recorded $14 million in severance costs, and we expect to eliminate this year up to 475 of 650 planned staff positions. We'll incur additional costs of up to $3 million this year and $8 million in years 2 and 3. Then there's $26 million in write-downs and depreciation related to the shutdown of our analog TV and shortwave infrastructures. Additionally, we've provided approximately $5 million for decommissioning costs on our TV analog locations. So for both shortwave on our CI and our analog assets, the effect of the write-offs on our bottom line is partially mitigated, and that's by recognizing previously received capital funding of $23 million in the first quarter. And this largely explains the increase in appropriations quarter over quarter. By the end of this fiscal year, the operating appropriation recognized as revenue is expected to be $999.5 million. This reflects a $27.8 million reduction in our operating appropriation as a result of the year 1 impact of the 2012 federal budget reduction. The other big financial story for the corporation came, as mentioned by Hubert, in July, when the CRTC released its decision to phase out the Local Programming Improvement Fund, from which we received $47 million this past broadcast year. The contribution rate decreased by 1/3 effective September 1st, 2012, and will reduce a further third in September 2013 until complete elimination in September of 2014. Donc, jusqu'à présent,
up to now, we're in the way of getting our objectives, financial objectives for the year. However, a certain number of risks are weighing on us, and we continue to pay attention to our environment and to set up our contingency plans. A few examples. D'abord, Il y a aussi leur marché de recettes en ce qui concerne la publicité dans l'environnement actuel de croissance économique bas et réelle. Nos stratégies de multiplateforme nous desservent bien et nous comptons développer des approches de vente innovatrices. Le retard ou disons l'arrêt potentiel de la saison de hockey va avoir un effet inévitable.
Plans for replacement programming and for cost containment. Then there's the CRTC license renewal hearings in November, as mentioned by Hubert. In our rapidly evolving ecosystem and with ongoing vertical integration, we'll look to continue creating partnerships where possible, a priority for the corporation as outlined in our strategic plan. And in the coming months, government funding decisions are expected to be made regarding salary inflation funding for 2013-2014. Tous ces éléments font
all these elements are such that it is more important than ever to respect the principles of our 2015 strategy. Set up initiatives for growth of the revenue and diminish more the cost of operating. These principles are essential if we want to carry out our plans, our objectives, and reach our financial and commercial and long-term objectives. Thank you. Merci. Et encore une fois.
Suzanne. Voilà donc ce qui fait le tour pour le moment.
This is what
turn now. The situation of CBC Radio-Canada actually is different issues, short-term issues. And what happens with the long-term ones? Alors,
you surely know in this room is participatory and collaborative. It's more about people's active experience with the content than simply the passive consumption of it. Sharing it, interacting with it, co-creating it, recreating it, it's all being part of it. CBC Radio-Canada will need to devise new ways that will allow it to be the first place that Canadians think of when it comes to Canadian experience, Canadian culture, and Canadian democratic life. That's our goal. Anything short of that isn't good enough. Thank you. Richard?
Merci beaucoup, Hubert. Merci, M. Racine, Mme Moore.
Thank you very much.
Première partie.
Donc, this is the end of the first part of our annual meeting. I would invite you to come and take place. And we're going to go to the panel.
A roundtable discussion. So we'll give them a nice round of applause once we've brought them up here. So first, there's Adrienne Arsenault. Ms. Arsenault is a correspondent for The National, based in Toronto. Over the years, she's been based in London, Jerusalem, and Washington. She has won and been nominated for several Gemini Awards, was named the Commonwealth Broadcasting Association's Journalist of the Year in 2005, picked up a Gracie Award for Outstanding Female Correspondent and a Monte Carlo Festival Award for coverage of the Zimbabwe election. Bienvenue, Adrienne. David Cochran, Provincial Affairs Reporter for CBC Newfoundland and Labrador and the host of On Point, CBC's weekly political talk show. He's a local guy, born here in St. John's. He's earned a bachelor's degree from Memorial University of Newfoundland. He's worked for the CBC since 1998. Thanks for having us, David. Céline
Galipeau, disons, chef d'antenne de Téléjournal de Radio-Canada, as a foreign correspondent for CBC and Radio-Canada. She has been assigned to London, Moscow, Beijing, Paris, where she's covered the important events of the last 20 years in Chechnya, Kosovo, Iraq, and Algeria, to name only a few places. Moreover, she also has received very many prizes, and in 2009, she's been an officer of the National Order of Quebec and designated as one of the women the most influential in Canada by Globe and Mail. Welcome to Céline.
And last but not least, Tom Harrington, the co-host of Marketplace, CBC Television's award-winning primetime investigative consumer show. A native of St. John's and 9-time Gemini nominee, Tom Harrington was previously the sports correspondent for CBC News, reporting for The National. He's worked in Calgary and in Montreal. He's also been a member of CBC Sports broadcast crew at several Olympic Games, the Commonwealth Games, the Pan American Games in Winnipeg, and the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. Thanks for being here.
Great to be back. Thank you.
Yeah. Between the four of you, we probably got 100 years maybe of CBC experience.
Nice. Very nice.
At least.
Between the four of you, though. One of the things that we notice when we meet CBCers anywhere across the country, there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of pride for what we do. I think we just enjoy what we're doing. We put everything we've got into it. So for you, what drives you? Just to kick these things off, what drives you? What brings you into work today and makes you do what you do?
I'll start because I've actually got the seniority here. I've been at CBC 31 years in my current employ, but for people locally who might remember a group called the Sanderlings that I sang in at CBC in St. John's back in the 1960s, I have an association with CBC that goes back almost 50 years. And I've often said it's a bit like a family, a really quirky, odd family at times, with crazy uncles in the basement and maybe a few in-laws that you might not be happy with, but it's still a family. So no matter where you go in Canada, you feel connected. And I think that's how you and others who watch and listen to our programming feel as well, that no matter where you go in Canada, you feel connected. And so for me, and doing this as long as I have in many different places in the country and in many different permutations, that never changes, that sense of commitment and connection to Canada. Hearing our own voices, seeing our own faces across all platforms now. Boy, has that changed. But so I think there's that part of it, that family. And for me, my current role in Marketplace and the show that we do is very much, I think, right down Main Street when it comes to what CBC is all about. It's a show that no other network does, would ever do, and it's been on the air for 40 years now. And so I think it in its own way represents what the best of the CBC is.
Merci. Céline, vous avez...
No, you have a whole experience, not as much as Tom, but if you allow me, I will speak in French, and I'm the only francophone here. I would say that I've begun with Radio-Canada. I wanted to public television because I thought it was there where you could the best journalist possible. And today, again, I think that now I like the telejournal, and also without fearing, for example, any report, what they think about it, whether it's important. In 2010, was one of our colleagues who was in Nigeria. There was already there was a famine. There was 13,000 children dead. There was 1 million to 3,000 young Africans who were in the process of dying of hunger. And so evidently there's all sorts of other important events which happened. In Quebec, it was the Commission of Bassarache and in Ottawa and everything. But we've decided collectively as a team that day to open with a reporting as a chronicle also, all of that. There was a very famous person there in Quebec who had tweeted on her account and with all about Nigeria. Or was it suicide in Nigeria? Was it, and that day there, we all looked at each other and saying, okay, it begins badly that. But we have decided that it was what we had to do finally to look at Nigeria. And finally she wrote on her blog, there were 64% of the people had responded. We were interested in seeing that the public television makes choices which are different and which are courageous. And I think that for me, every day, it was a little bit that. It's just this pride of being able to do things, journalism, which can be directly tied to things which are not necessarily with the society itself, but we do it to inform people. We do it so people can feel themselves, they can know what is going on, they have the best, they make the best decisions as much as our citizens. That's my pride every day to be able to work on that, and that's what I do. I would never have wanted to do anything else than this.
Parcours as Céline. You've worked in Canada, you've worked abroad, regions and all that. What's it for you?
You know, it's funny. I'm listening to everybody talk, and I know that what we all have in common is that we all have a little bit of a problem with authority, and I think, and
okay,
for me,
say what you want.
So this is awkward. But I think what makes me proud as a journalist in particular is that no one has ever picked up the phone and said to me, "Don't do that. You know, go easy on that, or don't go down that road." You know, I'm fiercely proud of that at CBC. I think we'd burn the place down if somebody tried to do that to us. So for me, to know that when I go into work and we have knockdown brawls about stories, and we do, it's about the merit of the story. You know, it's not about who are we likely to offend. You know, which sponsor is going to be unhappy with us. We don't care. We really don't care. Don't care if people don't like us who are in charge. With all due respect to them, I don't care. I don't work for them. I work for these people. And so that's what makes me happy to go to work every day.
Yeah. David.
Absolutely. And Adrian's right about that. I mean, you are given a lot of independence and a lot of leash as a journalist working for the CBC, but you have to, of course, earn the length of that leash by being a bit of a grown-up about it. What I like working for the CBC here, being the local guy on this panel, is that the stories we get to do here really matter to the people who live next door, the people you run into at the pub, the people you meet at the gym, the people you see at the restaurant. We are given the opportunity to do significant stories about significant issues in the long narrative history of Newfoundland and Labrador. We get to be on the front row of that. And you know, I always said that being a journalist beats working for a living. Not that the job isn't hard and doesn't have its challenges, but you get to go to work every day, talk to people about what's going on, and then at the end of the day, tell everyone else what you talked about. You know, it's a great way to see a province like Newfoundland and Labrador. I've been to places on the north coast of Labrador and on the islands off the south coast of Newfoundland that I would probably never get to on my own. But this company, and with its commitment to local news, it gives you those opportunities. You get to be in the front row of significant history, and you talk about never being told to back off. There's some difficult times here. You know, it's a small province. Big companies have a lot of sway. Powerful premiers have a lot of sway. Powerful premiers get very mad at you and cut you off and scream at you in public. But the bosses get your back as long as you're doing your job right, and I think that's important. And the smaller the market, the stronger, more independent you can be as a journalist. And I think CBC sets the standard here and makes it possible for the other media agencies to do it, because if we're taking the heat by being the lead car, everyone else has a little bit more room.
There's something to be said too for, and it sounds corny, but it's kind of a vocation to work for CBC, because you find no matter where you go, everybody kind of believes in it. Everybody who works there, they wouldn't be there really if they didn't believe in it. And the fact is that in our industry, there are a lot of jobs that pay better than we do. But the fact is, people are at CBC because we can do everything you just heard. Because when you go to those other places, there simply isn't the range of opportunities to stretch your wings as a journalist, for example, to host programs or write. You don't have the commercial interest pressing down on you. I know on my show that's a huge issue at Marketplace, but yet there's a wall between what we do and everything else, and it's protected, and it shows. I mean, people are enjoying our show more than they ever have. But the idea that everybody who works at the CBC believes in public broadcasting, much like the people who watch and listen to it. We have that connection I talked about. I think that's so significant, and you really do see that. And people have been around a long time, and we've been through a lot. Boy, I've seen a lot happen to the CBC in 30-plus years, but I still care deeply about it. I do.
One of the things, you know, sit in.
No, I think what Adrian was is very true, though, because, you know, when you're a journalist at Radio-Canada or at CBC, it's something that you're being asked constantly. So during an election period, for example, do you get, you know, instructions to do a type of story or not to do a type of story? And in my whole career, it never, ever happened to me, whether here in Canada or elsewhere, that someone would call me, a boss or anybody would call me to tell me, well, I think maybe you should be careful with that angle, maybe we should, you know, as editorially, of course, some people would, you know, give us instructions, or we discuss issues with our editorial board, but never has the political part played a role in what we do. And I think that's extremely important.
The four of you are storytellers, and we know that, you know, as broadcasters, like the privates do this, public broadcasting, CBC, Radio-Canada, we're trying to do that. It's to create this dialogue with Canadians, to have this public space, have a way of expressing diversity of opinions, of culture, of all of that. How does that translate in the work that you do? Adrian?
Well, it's funny, we were talking about this yesterday because we were going through this, and the notion of a phrase of public space can be kind of a difficult one to understand, in the same way that words like vertical integration make me shiver. I don't get them. You know, I don't live in that world, and I'm rather happy that I don't have to. But it occurs to me that the reason why I was confused by the notion of public space is it's because it's what we do all the time. It used to be that this experience of watching television news was a very passive one. You know, there were white men who made decisions about what was important for your life, and they showed it to you on television, and you watched or you didn't, and that was it. That's not the way it works anymore. There is a massive integration. We all talk, and we all communicate. And so everything we do is about the public space. And lots of shows do it in lots of very specific ways. You know, the Fifth Estate, which I think stacks up against any investigative program anywhere on the planet. They did something interesting with the G20 not that long ago. They went to all the YouTube videos that everybody posted. These were the big riots in Toronto. And they went to the people who shot those videos and said, can we see what you shot just before that moment you posted and just after. And then they stitched all of them together. And so they got a 360 view of what really happened. Never mind what the official reports were. They saw what really happened. And so this interaction with the public, this ability to work together to investigate and reveal the truth, is what they do, what we do all the time.
How do you think that this public space might be different for a public broadcaster, for CBC, versus what our competitors are doing? How do you see that?
I think if I may, I think the expectation is different because you own us. You pay the bills. As Canadians, there is an expectation that we are completely accessible, and we're finding all kinds of interesting ways to do that. To me, the public space notion is metaphysical and physical. It's like the Broadcast Center in Toronto, where I work, has a massive atrium, if you've ever been there. People come in, they eat lunch, they watch our shows on the TVs there, they see Rick Mercer walking through, and they say hi, and they're really connected to the building literally. And during the World Cup 2 years ago, there were outdoor parties and where they have massive screens set up, and you could watch the games together with your friends. Like the CBC is like reaching in now, and rather we're not passive as Adrian was saying, we're much more involving people now. And so that public space is there in a physical sense, but the public space is metaphysical as well. And I did a show last year on Marketplace on When the Repairman Knocks, where we invited repairmen into a house with hidden cameras to see if they were legit or not. And I don't know if any of you saw that show, but while we were on the air for an hour across the country, I did a live chat online from 7 Eastern Time in Toronto, 8:30 here, until well past midnight, and interacting with Canadians who were watching the show who had questions or comments or ideas. So we were responding, but everybody could read that. So people were learning from each other, they were learning from us, we were learning from them, they were hitting us over the head, they were criticizing us, they were giving us kudos. It was fantastic, and we'd never done it before. So suddenly we reached into a whole new part of the country and gave them access to our show, and we got access to them that we'd never done before. That's public space too.
And during an election in Quebec, how would that be translated? When we started talking about the public space, I found it was a little bit theoretical. I had a bit of trouble. I thought about it at night, and suddenly I woke up and say the public space, that's what we do. The news bulletin is a reflection of what this public space is. And during the last elections, we pushed it to the edge, and in our news bulletins there were over 1,200 people expressed their views, and different. We had over 450 candidates that came to talk online, and we have to try and communicate with all the electors and to try and reflect what they were living, and we saw what they were going through, and we could talk about wisdom, popular wisdom, and I had an extraordinary experience. We had the electoral compass, and we allow people to compare their position compared to some questions during the election and the party, so they're able to situate themselves on the political spectrum, and I was really amazed. And there was so much response, and people really like that. There were over half 500,000 people went to play with this electoral compass, and they could situate themselves, and we took their data to report on what was going on and the immigrants with the immigrants, and what they would, the voices they would give to the liberals, for example, how the young people reacted regarding the conflict with the university, and so it was very interactive with this, and that was an extraordinary tool, not just for people to express themselves, but we, the journalists, we learned a lot. So I think we pushed that on Twitter. Every time we interviewed political people, we had the dialogues. That was just incredible. So now when we prepare our interviews, often we are going to post on Twitter We are going to post who we are going to interview, not Jean Charest, but so when we interview politicians, we want to know what they think, what they would like to hear from those, the question they like to ask, and it may influence the way we do our interviews. So it's a real, very a tool.
Social networks.
Yes.
How does this new technology, technology in general, but social networks, how does that influence the work you do?
Well, we use it a lot on in the last year we've launched 2 shows here, both dedicated to that public space that we're talking about, On Point and On Point Radio. On Point is a television show on the weekends, very similar to Evan Solomon's Power and Politics, but shorter and more local. The radio show is much more interactive. And we have usually 3 politicians in the studio each week, but we reach out for feedback less so on phone lines and more so on social media. We use Twitter for it. And what I found is really good about that is we're getting a whole new audience and a whole new demographic participating in political discussion, and that's under 35s, under 30s, under 25s, and in some cases under 20s. They're much more active on social media than on Twitter than they are on Facebook, which is sort of becoming the Florida of the internet. Twitter is really their medium of choice. And they weigh into it through Twitter much more than they ever would if we said, call this number, leave a voicemail, send an email. Because it's more Twitter, Pinterest, and text messages than it is even what we consider cutting-edge social media, things like Facebook. So we use that, and so you get one of the big issues in politics in this country is a total level of youth disengagement. They don't vote, they're not listened to, or they feel they're not listened to. They feel like they don't have a platform to raise their issues and speak. I know it's only 140 characters at a time, but with the way some of them can type on their thumbs, they can hit you with 6 tweets in a span of 30 seconds and make a point which we can bring on the air or a question that we can put directly to a politician about an issue that matters to them. And I think that's interesting because the civic conversation, the public conversation in this province tends to be dominated by people of a particular generation who we've heard from for a long, long time. And if we can use our BlackBerries and our iPhones to reach out to the next generation of players in this province, I think that's interesting. It breeds a loyalty between us and them. It brings a perspective that we haven't always been getting. And we're speaking to them on their playing field. We're not making them come to us on our terms. We're going to them on theirs. And I think it's a very interesting way of engaging a whole audience that, let's face it, you wouldn't think would be that interested in a political radio show every Friday afternoon.
One of the things that, when Hubert was speaking a while ago about the strategic plan, everyone, every way, one of the big priorities is the region, the place of the regions. How do you think, why is that important? How does it play out in the work that you're doing?
Well, it's the entirety of the work that I'm doing, or for the most part. I mean, the great thing about being part of the CBC is you can work in a region and get opportunities on a network level. It's one of the great reasons why you stay in a company like this. I don't think you can overstate the importance of having an independent public broadcaster in the smaller population centers of the country. There's an independence there that isn't always there because of the commercial concerns of privates or the political pressure that can be applied to private broadcasters. There's the willingness, like this week, for example, we had Vic Adopia, John Gotti, and Keith Burgess in Natwashish in Labrador. Those are places that the public broadcaster will go, will spend. That's not a cheap set of plane tickets. That's the sort of place that we'll go, the sort of stories that we're willing to take on, and it's important that we do it. Now, the challenge we have as a national broadcaster is not to sort of ghettoize regional stories and have them only told on the regional platforms, like on Here and Now or On Point or the local radio shows. We need to find a way to get more, I think, of those regional stories up onto the network level. We do a good job of it. I think we could always do a better job of it. Maybe that's my bias as a regional reporter, but there's parts of this province and parts of this country that there's no market forces that are going to put a television broadcaster or a local morning radio show the way we'll do it in places like Labrador. It just won't be done by the private sector. So it provides an opportunity to tell those stories to the rest of the province and to the rest of the country, and it's really only CBC that's in that game.
C'est la même chose au niveau national aussi. You were talking regionally, but
parle de façon régionale. Pour nous, par exemple, non.
To take our show on the road, so we went to various cities. We took some national issues, but translated them into a more regional way. So we used local reporters. We went, for example, in Quebec or in Rimouski or Trois-Rivières, and then we took a national issue and we just transformed our show into a regional show, and it was really interesting because pour les gens des stations locales, c'était
And the local stations, it was extraordinary to be able to work with us. We took cameramen, and we took also a little team of our own. We had also cameramen which were there, technicians who were there, could work with us, the reporters, the journalists who worked with us, and that gave a result which was really very interesting because it's points of view that you don't hear as often and people you don't hear speak as much, and I think that gave a sort of a colour which was quite different to the way which we've covered those elections. It reflected a diversity of voices and of opinions that we could have perhaps not had if we had been all the time in Montreal. And they reproach us also on the French side that we're too much centered in Montreal. So it was
saying about there aren't the market forces to do it. It's really interesting, you know. For me, I travel to a whole bunch of places, and I'm struck by how lonely it is sometimes because you don't bump into your colleagues from the private sector very often. You know, we were in Attawapiskat a number of times over the last year or so, and not just flying in and out, which I saw some of my colleagues do. Colleagues I had great respect for, the people themselves. You know, we stayed, you know, because there are places it's important that not just to go there, but to be there, to wake up there in the morning, to watch what happens when the kids try to go to school or not go to school. You know, to find the key to the room that holds the donations that Canadians provided and say, hey, how come these haven't been distributed? You know, to go stand at an office and wait until the leadership of that community is supposed to be there and say, where were you, what's going on? You know, this loneliness that we encounter, I think, is a tribute to this organization, because it's not cheap to go to these places. It's really, and it flies against, I'm sure, what a lot of people would think would be a good idea, to get in and get out and get the story done and put your marker there. They don't think like that. It's like, if you're going to do the story, show up, go there, do the story, and bring it home, and go again and follow it up. You know, and it is a pretty lonely endeavor, and internationally too. I can't tell you the number of times, I know you've encountered this, we go to places where we know something is happening, and it's about to happen, and it's about to become something we talk about, and we bump into the BBC, and it's the BBC and the CBC, and sometimes some of the French colleagues from Europe, and that's it.
Picking up on the idea of overseas, but coming back to Canada, which is massive, as we all know. It's the biggest, you know, it's a massive country, and here we are as a broadcaster with, you know, 30-something million people. We are working with a budget that's near the bottom per capita of any public broadcaster in the world, in a country with 6 time zones, multiple languages. And we're doing, when I joined the CBC in 1981, there were 12,000 employees, about that. We were doing English and French television news local. There were no news channels. There was CBC radio. There was no web, nothing else like that. Now we have multiple channels, as you know, multiple platforms with half the staff, less real dollars than we had back then, and doing more than most public broadcasters are in the world. So reflecting a country of this size and so diverse is really difficult. It's one thing to send people overseas. It's one thing to get people up north or out west or down here. So I think that's an ongoing challenge for us, to be honest with you. And that's, frankly, is a money issue. You know, Hubert's talked about the choices the corporations had to make in recent years. We've made those choices for many years. They're just getting harder and harder and harder now. And so reflecting the regions to the other regions remains, I think, the nut we haven't cracked yet. It's still a work in progress. And I'm not talking only about news and current affairs here. I'm talking about everything. We see Republic of Doyle, which I love, and I know you guys love, and it's a fantastic success story. It kind of happened outside the CBC. We have it on the air, and it's great, and we open the place up, and we promote the heck out of it, and all the shows that are on the air. But the days of the CBC studio in St. John's rocking out, you know, all around the circle and everything else back in the day, those days are gone. I don't know if they'll ever be back. But so we have to find new ways, more interesting ways, partnerships, that kind of thing, to reflect ourselves to each other. And as to echo what everybody else said, we're the only ones who will do it.
I guess you bring me to the last question, because we're soon running out of time, but we know that we're going up for a license renewal in the fall, in November. If you had to say, you know, why is it so important to have a CBC at Radio-Canada? Why do we need a public broadcaster still today in 2012, even though there's a lot of choices rather than, you know, 50 years ago or 75 years ago? What would you say?
As a Canadian, I want someone to get my back. You know, I want someone to poke people in the chest and ask them questions. And I know that the CBC will do it. I know that we will ask uncomfortable questions, and we'll be slapped for it, and I don't care. I'm glad that I have the CBC to wake up to in the morning. You know, there isn't anywhere I would rather work, anywhere. And I will fight for this organization because I believe that we get Canada's back and that we won't stop doing it. It doesn't matter how much money they take away.
I think it's not that we're not just your national public broadcaster, we're your local public broadcaster. We do 100 minutes of local television a day. We do news on Saturdays and Sundays on television. We do 7.5 to 8 hours of live radio programming a day. And then another 3 to 4 hours of that on the weekend. No one else is going to match that. If that goes away, that's gone forever. If that gets diminished, it's diminished forever. Local programming on the privates on the television side here don't increase until we increase. We announce we're going to 90 minutes, they go to 90 minutes. If we go back to 60, I guarantee you they go back to 60. That's just the way it's going to go. It's about competition and cost. But it's not just that we are the national broadcaster, we're the local public broadcaster. We're in Gander, we're in Grand Falls, we're in Corner Brook, we're in Goose Bay, we're in Lab City. We've got stringers in places like Marystown. That counts, that matters. And Newfoundland's a small population, but man, this is a big place, as anyone knows. Trying to get a satellite truck to a story here, how far away is that? 14 hours, you know? These are the sort of challenges that we deal with in a province of 500,000 people, but we're there. And, you know, the truck may take a little while getting there, but the reporter will get there. And
But
all the
it
new
will
media
get there.
lets us do it.
It might get there.
If it doesn't break down, yeah. The roads are bad, there's potholes.
Okay, so bit of vehicle repair, but we'll be okay. Céline, pour toi?
Moi, je pense que c'est important d'avoir une télévision publique.
What's important is to have a public, for the image that we've had all these programs, which Radio Canada does still, and which we are the only to do. Because if you look, for example, in Quebec, the television, all the different programs which have made the government react, which have we've forced a Charbonneau Commission to do something in democracy in Quebec. It's for that we do, not only for us, but we're preparing the American elections. But when you look at all that Radio Canada, in spite of all the cuts, in spite of all we had lived or experienced since a certain number of years, I would say the resilience of these people working there, of the management, because all of this who want to still allow us to do these sorts of programs. We have extraordinary programming, which are some things like Discovery, Découverte, Nos sur Terre, the big documentary things, and because we are the only ones at this time to be able to still do that. So I think that's a lot of pride. We're proud of this. And I think that we've asked why recently we would get up all the mornings. It's for that. So to be able to contribute to that. And I wouldn't say that, honestly, it's not because we're in a public assembly of Radio Canada or CBC. I believe this really, that we are the only people to be able to still continue to do this sort of thing. And it is necessary that we do it. We have to do it.
He loves that.
Our veteran guy. He wants to kick it off. He wants to end it. It's perfect.
Thank God we have him.
Yeah, well,
how do we plan these things, eh? Geez.
There's an American writer named Bob Greene once wrote about being a parent, and he said, you know, you can't imagine yourself having your life with a child, and you can't imagine your life without one. And I think CBC's like that. But how we could do this? That just ask yourself, what would it be like without us? It wouldn't be the same. There's polling that's been done by us and other people who've said the CBC, even if they don't watch it, needs to stay. They think it's part of who we are. They list it with Medicare. They put it up in that sort of stratosphere of important Canadian institutions. So Canadians are telling us that even if they watch maybe hockey, maybe that's all they watch on the CBC. Maybe they don't listen to anything. They don't know who Peter Zosky ever was. They still think the CBC needs to be here because it's a bulwark against the largest cultural leviathan in the world, the United States. We're the only country in the world that watches another country's television, right? So somebody's got to be there for you, and that's us.
And on that note, merci beaucoup au panel.
Thank you for the panel. So good ambassadors of CBC Radio. Cela finit.
Of this presentation. Thanks again for sharing your experience, your insight, your ideas, your feelings as well, because I think that's very important. I think CBC is all about feelings, about guts. So great, way to go. J'inviterai Hubert, M. Racine, Mme Morris à venir nous rejoindre ici.
Pour les questions-réponses. For the questions and answers.
For question period, it's your turn to have a say. So remember that the web users from across the country who are watching us live can get to us with their questions. Pour nous transmettre toutes questions relatives à ce que vous...
whether you should transmit your question, whether it's Hubert or any of the people here present, and you complete the section at the bottom of your monitor, or you have the addresses.
We're also going to look at the questions which have been submitted by video, naturally. La salle ici dans
limited. We may not be able to answer all of the questions today, but the most frequently asked ones will be posted on our corporate website. So, questions are now going off to you. We have one question up. Sir.
Thank you. Well done to all of you. Is this on? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know who can answer this, and I hope the answer is no.
No.
Not going to happen. Yeah.
No leaking the answers, though.
Is there any risk that we'll have to put up with advertising on CBC Radio?
Say no. That one is pretty simple. On Radio 1 and La Première Chaîne, absolutely not. That's why we have decided to, because we think that by doing that, we would completely denature what talk radio and what CBC Radio 1 and La Première Chaîne represent. That's where we went to Espace Musique and Radio 2. We think that those two are more amenable to the kind of advertising and sponsorship that we want to put there in order to gather a new source of revenue and continue delivering the services we deliver.
Yeah,
so the answer was no.
Must be appreciated. For the panel, the question that's coming in from email. So what's your advice for young or upcoming reporters as it relates to the skill set in order to be successful?
Surely not for me.
You know, I'm pretty sure that if I applied for a job now, I wouldn't get hired.
I'd hire you.
Yeah, well, thanks. I've learned that I don't actually know how to do much anymore, and that what's happened now is that the young people who come to us have this amazing tool belt of skills. You know, they can shoot, they can edit, they know how to transmit, and that matters when you're speeding in a car in the Sahara Desert. They can get the story on the air. This is very important, but I would say don't forget the basics. You know, you have to be able to communicate the information. It doesn't matter if you're revealing a cure for cancer. If you don't know how to communicate it, no one's going to hear you. So the basics have to matter. Ethics, the law, why we do this. So don't forget those. Learn it. That's a dig at me. I spelled David's name incorrectly this morning. That's a dig at me.
I think an important thing for young journalists to learn is to not say no to opportunity once you get your foot in the door. I mean, I never went to journalism school, so I'm a bit of an anomaly working in television and radio. But I got a summer job filling in because I was the editor of the local student newspaper. And then Brian Tobin called a snap election in 1999. Nobody expected it. He was only like 2.5 years into his term. And I was coming back from getting a coffee, about to go to city council meeting, and my boss at the time, who's my boss now, Peter Gulledge, pointed at me and said, "You don't have any kids, right?" And I said, "No." He goes, "You can go on the election bus." I'm like, "Yes, I can." And that's how I became the political reporter for CBC Radio.
Your advice is not have kids?
I was 24 or 25 at the time. So, but, you know, these opportunities come up and you have to seize them. And Adrienne's right when she talks about having that foundational skill set that you need to learn how to do these things. But you see sometimes, and I sound like an old guy in the newsroom because I'm becoming the old guy in the newsroom, people want the perfect job immediately, and it doesn't always happen that way. And you have to pay your dues, and you have to do the grunt work, but you have to say yes to the opportunity and then make the most of it. And if you do that, you'll create your own work, because we work in a results-based business. You can either get the story and get to the deadline, or you can't. And if you can't, they will find the person who can. So don't say no to opportunity and hustle.
Right. Our next question comes from video, so let's go to the videotape.
Hi CBC, I'm Diana, the Reimagine CBC online community facilitator, coming to you from Vancouver, BC. Now we have engaged over 40,000 Canadians in an effort to support, revitalize, and reimagine the CBC, and they have spoken. 84% have ranked Canadian perspectives as one of their top 3 ideas in our Reimagine CBC survey. Now, as a communication student, I know how hard it is to find content and coverage of news, arts, and culture that is uniquely Canadian. But the CBC has always been fantastic about providing this kind of content that's neglected by the private sector. But this needs to become an even higher priority. Now, some great ideas that Canadians have include teaming up with other organizations and producers to air more independent productions, as well as collaborating with the National Film Board in order to use their archives of readily available Canadian content. Now, I want the CBC to excel. So my question for you is, how would the CBC engage with independent organizations and citizens to further bring this Canadian perspective to the fore?
So maybe two pieces to this.
Que deux parties. Moi, je ferai ce qu'il a fait avec le partenariat et je ne veux pas répéter ce que nos 4 invités ont dit au sujet des engagements sociaux, mais on va y revenir parce que c'est comme ça qu'on se transforme. D'abord, c'est question de partenariat très normal pour nous. Dans l'environnement des ressources en diminution, il faut absolument penser en termes de comment est-ce qu'on peut être, disons, quelqu'un qui est animateur ou qui il le fait, et pas le fait tout seul. C'est dans tous les domaines. Si ça fait faire une équipe avec...
For 3 days, we will be a facilitator, whether it was at one point in time teaming up with another organization to bid for games, whether it's going to be l'OSM in Montreal, where we teamed up with l'Orchestre Symphonique to produce and to broadcast their first show out of their new hall. So because our environment is one of diminishing resources, also because we think that that's the way we need to change the relationship that we connect with Canadians, that's what we do more of and we will continue to be doing more of. You heard these 4 people in their different contributions to CBC Radio-Canada now opening up to social media. We have a few examples of what we just did on Radio-Canada, Michel COG now, and I was very struck by what you were saying, David. We used to have a call-in show, national call-in show with Pierre Maisonneuve, who was there for 19 or 20 years, did a great, great job. But Michel COG now does a call-in show without phones. He does exactly what you do. He's doing it in the social spheres. He tweets with people. And the connection that they have there, and as per the question, is about interacting and changing the interaction with Canadians. And I think that your examples of a few minutes ago go very well to the answer to this question.
You want to jump in?
Tom? One of the challenges I think today in the media, and particularly for the CBC, is we have such loyal and passionate believers who have been with us for a long time. But the new generations that are coming along are pulled in so many directions by content and opportunities and what's out there, and they can PVR and watch it in their iPods and do all kinds of things. It's such a different way to deliver and accept what's going on in the now. So one of our challenges has been, how do we get those next generations who will feel the same way about the CBC as you do? What I'm excited about with our show is we're seeing lots of 30-somethings, as David was describing, watching our show. I keep saying, look, if you own a cell phone or own a house or a car or you got kids or you got a pet or whatever, you should watch our show because it's relevant. It's not, it's been on the air for 40 years, but it's as relevant now as it's ever been. But it's trying to get that out to that next generation with all the noise that's out there in the media and try to drill in and find that spot, that comfort zone for us to get them in. And no question that social media has been absolutely essential on all platforms to that.
That being said, we don't own all the answers. We're still trying things out. Some experiments are working out, others are not. We need to get feedback. That's when we throw out questions and we need feedback to adjust some of the experiences. We've got our first, through the leadership of Kirsten, who runs our English services, we've got the first all-digital station in Hamilton. That's a test case. We have something similar a bit in Montreal, where on Rive Nord and Rive Sud, and you saw the little, on the video, you saw the journalist that manned that. We have people now who are locally equipped with completely different technology to be locally embedded in the community and trying to get us some stories we never before got to, but in a kind of different way. Again, experimenting, pushing the envelope, trying, failing, coming back. That's what we're all about.
I'd like to get in a couple of questions from the room here. Oui, monsieur.
Hi, Jeff Chalk from St. John's. Thanks. So I'm a big CBC fan, absolutely, from my early 20s when Barbara Frum was on radio doing As It Happens. And I think Adrian said earlier about the quality of the Fifth Estate. My God, I mean, we can put the Americans in comparison to shame. So I hope my question is understood to be coming from a friendly person.
Uh-oh. That being said.
We get them all the time.
That being said. And I guess I would start with our CEO. I guess I was really flummoxed by our Olympic coverage this year. There were days I was embarrassed for Heather Hiscox to watch Heather ride a bike around Trafalgar Square or go shopping and not have access to Canada House. Now, I understand, Jacques Rogue is a big control freak and, the symbol can't be shown by whomever and blah, blah, blah. So I really wondered about the value for money. What was the value for me? I didn't get any. I used to have to watch other channels. I would much more support our people going into Natwashish than Peter Mansbridge going to the Northwest Passage again. These are my dollars. And Adrian, we met when I walked in, and I'm a big fan of your work. Why you would send someone like Adrian, of her caliber, to cover a hurricane? I thought, all right, so you got financial problems. Yeah, we heard that from your CFO and from yourself. What am I missing in those three examples in terms of value to the public, value for my dollar, right? When, as I would say, I bet there's not anybody in this room who could arm wrestle me to be a bigger fan.
You bet. Okay, there are many pieces to that question. Let me try to do justice to it. First off, let's talk about choices of Olympic coverage. As you know, we didn't have the rights, so you couldn't see pictures. You could not see video. So the purpose of us being there was to show you something else about London that the Olympic coverage and the broadcaster, CTV, not to name it, CTV didn't do. And I think that and we couldn't get our cameras into certain places, and we had to wait outside with the athletes to exit the Olympic venues for them to be accessible to us. Actually, the Canadian Olympic Committee did a pretty good job at making those athletes available to us because they know that between the Olympic Games, we're the only ones that cover amateur sports. We're the only ones that care and will show you the development of the kids and the teenagers into national caliber athletes, into Olympic and world athletes. And that's why we're very pleased that we're able to strike a deal to bring back the games to CBC in 14 and 16. And we announced last week that we're also doing the Pan Am Games, which is a step towards that. And you might say, well, why are you having these Olympic Games when you're having difficulty with your budgets? And the answer is because those two games will be, in the way we costed them and the way we won those bids, we think accretive, meaning, in our world, it will be a benefit to our bottom line. It will be actually programming that will bring dollars to CBC so that we can reinvest it somewhere else. So that's about the Olympic coverage and the kind of tight space a non-Olympic broadcaster is in, trying to show athletes and the city and what's happening there in a different light. I can't tell you about why Adrian was there.
Sure.
Maybe Adrian can tell you why she was there.
It's funny about the hurricane. I did 2 in 2 weeks. Odd. The thing is about Leslie. Yes. The thing is about Leslie is that I'm not upset that Leslie was an underachiever. I don't think anyone in Newfoundland is upset that Leslie was a wimp, right? Hooray for Leslie. Go away, Leslie. But I tell you, as a national broadcaster, if we had not been here and something had happened, you would have been standing up and saying, where were you? Why don't you care? And so these are the decisions that we make all the time. What this province went through with Igor was terrible. And the effort that was made after it to make sure this province was okay was important. There was a moment when it was thought this could actually be a test of the defenses post-Igor. We need to make sure it's okay. You know what? I will jump on a plane and go anywhere. And I am happy to stand there and wait for Leslie, to be a wimp and wander away. That's great. And I think hooray for an organization that makes decisions to go rather than not go.
And just speaking from the local newsroom perspective, when you've got an event like that coming down to be bolstered by someone of Adrian's caliber, when Igor happened, someone whose name you'll never see on television, a woman named Angela Noss, who works as a field producer for the CBC, she came down afterwards, and for the people who were out on the field, like Lee Pitts and people in this room like Teddy Dillon and everyone who were out in the disaster zones, having that experienced hand who's been around the world handling tough stories, coming down and lending you a bit of guidance and advice and support and know-how. It's invaluable. It's one of the real strengths of the company. The vertical integration, the people playing the big leagues come down here to help us out when we need them. And we really value that, I know, in the local newsroom, because we are stretched so thin when we're doing it.
And the Mansbridge...
No, I just like to get another question, and so maybe, sir.
Yeah, my question, I'll ask it in English, but please feel free to answer in French. I'm a great fan of not only the English television, but French television, the main Radio-Canada network and Le Réseau des Informations. I'm also a great fan of high-definition television. It's the best thing to happen to TV since color. The problem here in St. John's, I am a subscriber of Rogers Cable. They do have a couple of stations in French high-definition. There's the Le Réseau des Sports and TVA Sport, but Radio-Canada Français and Le Réseau des Informations are not covered by Rogers. I wonder, what is the problem? Is there some technological problem with getting the signal here? Is it a problem with Rogers? I don't know. You spent millions of dollars to convert to high definition. You've closed down all the analog transmitters. Now we've got 100% broadcasting in high definition, but we get none of it what we can actually watch. Do you know what the problem is? And if so, or is it just a matter of communication with Rogers to get this fixed?
I don't know about the Rogers issue. Denise Wilson, are you here? I'm here. Can you help me with the answer on Rogers? I'd have to defer to my transmission. Okay. So I promise I don't have the answer. It seems that unless, Stephen, do you have an idea? All right. So everybody that seems to be in this room right now, we don't have the answer. We will bring you the answer. I'll stop right there.
Corporate website?
No, actually, if you give us your email or a number, we'll make sure that you get the answer.
Parfait. Une question qui nous arrive de Twitter. Comment on...
How do you tell the story about of the francophones all around Canada, not just only those of Quebec? And so Céline, who's going to speak about that, she said it's a challenge for us. I think we make a lot of efforts, and I understand, and it's not quite enough. We have plans to improve all of that, but it's difficult because we, in the telejournal particularly, we principally talk about Quebec, and we have to reflect also the main problems of Quebec, and also those of the rest of the country. And on that, I think that it's true that sometimes, particularly in periods which are very intense, as those of, for example, elections in Quebec, and very important, that we're going to have a covering which is covers more Quebec. But we have to do more as to improve that, and we're going to do it because we're trying to do more as far as regional reporting is concerned. We have to reflect the different ones outside Quebec. We're even obliged to reflect that more, the different regions in Quebec, not just Quebec and Montreal. We have had this initiative. We're going to go a bit everywhere in Quebec and the different parts of Quebec. We're going to try to see what people are doing everywhere else and interview people interested in all the different regions around Quebec. That's an effort already to try and reflect a bit more the reality of the different regions. And I think the same effort, you have to do it also in the whole country. But we are, in the telejournal of Moncton, you have it, in Winnipeg, we're trying to do things. And it's certain that I can also say, it's very important. We understand very important this importance in environment. You have to connect with francophones, which are outside Quebec. It's the same thing for the Anglophones, who are a minority also, because we all speak about francophones, but there are also Anglophones in Quebec, in the province of Quebec, in the region of Quebec, where there are Anglophones. You have to also cover them also, and with the same attention as we have also. And that's where Radio-Canada, yes, and the number of stories that we have to tell, and we know what have we covered, and we do that, try to justify what we're doing.
That's coming to us from John from Moncton. What do you say to those who argue that you're not accountable to Canadians?
Wow. Let's go back to slide number 2 for the chairman. There's a whole bunch of things that we're accountable to. I'll do it from the management's point of view, and maybe the chair can give you an idea of what that represents for us at the board level. Whether it's us going in front of Heritage Committee meetings, Senate Committee meetings, presenting our corporate plan, presenting our annual report, We've released close to 100,000 pages on access to information requests. We're up to about 1,650 access to information requests that we filled. There's about 30,000 of them on our website, the most frequently asked questions and what we think are the most pertinent. We've significantly improved our turnaround time, where we were not very good a couple of years ago. Now we're best in class. The transparency, you saw Suzanne now show you the results after the first quarter. We're very happy to finally be able to report on a quarterly basis. You'll be able to follow our financial situation. And that's only from the management's point of view, where we feed the information up to the board. The board then.
C'est sûr qu'on peut toujours faire mieux.
We can always do better, but in the last few years we have done a lot to be more transparent. There's always questions which are private, which we have to keep, but I think we try to answer that, and the mandate that we give to the legal people is to answer all questions. We have the obligation to answer these questions, but there are some which we cannot answer for reasons which are perhaps because it's a competition or private life, and 95% of the questions we want to answer them, and we try to. That's what we try to do. We want to be as transparent as possible. The financial information, give more information to show the Canadians how we are. And we like the fact,
We're going to be in front of the CRTC starting November 19th. You should just see the information that we're going to provide there for Canadians to look at and comment upon. So that's part of the reporting process.
Il y a une chose qui est sûre, c'est que les faux.
The thing is certain that you have to look to find the information in our website. There's a lot of information. Even I will go and get the information on the website, which I've asked around, and very often I will find the information I'm looking for. It's a very good website.
Our quarterly reports, they're about 50 or 60 pages. They're your quarterly reports. I touched on the financial information, but there's a lot more in there. We talk about our objectives, how we're doing performance-wise against our key indicators. So it's a really good source of information and up to date for you every 3 months.
So one last thing because this is a really, you know where I stand on accountability. In the promises that we made in 2015, we promised Canadians that twice a year there's going to be a report card that's going to be published. And this report card will have a number of indicators, and we will measure ourselves very publicly, with no filter, about how we're doing against these indicators. These indicators are not only discussed within our management team, they're approved by our board of directors. Everybody is in this room. This is our bulletin, this is our report card, and I hope that Canadians will judge us based on what we are posting up there and putting up. Sometimes and all the deltas, all the differences between where we wanted to be, the objectives, and where we actually landed are explained. Sometimes we fail, sometimes we meet, sometimes we exceed. But if you want to understand how the corporation is being managed and how we put ourselves out in terms of indicators, you will get that now twice a year, very clearly stated in our public report card.
Puis on va continuer à en rajouter des métriques au fil.
Have metrics during the years. We find other metrics that we're going to expose also to show to the Canadians. We're going to add all of it in our news work. Pour la question, nous avons...
The tape, please.
Hi, CBC. I'm Lindsay from Vancouver, in support of the Reimagine CBC project. One of the 3 most popular ideas on the Reimagine CBC public survey was more courageous reporting. 90% of the people who took the survey gave this idea 8 or more stars out of 10. Canadians want to see the CBC cover underreported stories and bring important issues back under the scrutiny of the public. As the communications manager for a group that represents citizen interest in the age of big telecom and big media, it's obvious to me that we need reporting that holds industry accountable and that gives intelligent, unflinching analysis the way that only public media can. CBC can be a leader in courageous reporting by doing things like continuing to engage viewers who want to text or email their ideas in, and by making all the news available online and easily searchable. My question for you is, how will the CBC lead in the digital age to report more courageously and engage citizens in the process?
Sounds like David would like to jump in here. But maybe Hubert first, and then David, as you wish.
Well, I'll again, if you leave the question there, if it's at all possible, I saw 3 pieces in there. I saw courage, I saw digital, and I saw social media again. Courage You heard stories. You heard Céline deciding to, on an evening, go with a story from Africa instead of going with a local story and trying to challenge the people who are watching. You heard Adrienne and some of the places that she's been in trying to challenge, again, our way of thinking. When we did the construction industry enquête story investigation, that was not a very popular subject matter, and a number of our people really were taken to task by that. I can go on. I mean, some of the stuff that I see Marketplace doing, making sure that what products are said to be is actually, I mean, they actually follow up on their promises. Courage, I think that's not a very big issue in our lives. For us in digital, it's a third piece in our strategic plan. We've committed to multiply by 2 our budget to become even more digital. It means that by 2015, we will have invested, whatever the top line of the media budget is, 5% of our budget, up from 2.5%, because we know that's where it's going. Social media, if you guys want to talk about that even more.
Well, I think one of the things about courageous journalism is that people read a lot into that phrase based on their own individual experiences, and it means different things to different people. Like sometimes you have people screaming at you saying, why aren't you doing more investigative journalism? What they're really saying is, why aren't you doing more journalism that reaffirms my worldview? Right. Why aren't you doing more of what I believe? And that's the negotiation you often have with your audience on those things. Courageous journalism, I don't think we're ever a newsroom that's going to flinch from a tough story. I've never been a part of an editorial discussion where we flinched away. We do want to do more enterprise and investigative journalism on a local level, and the reality of the company is that we've expanded our programming with reduced staff, so you have to do more with less. So you have to be more selective and pick your spots on these things, but I know we're going to make it more of a priority here in Newfoundland and Labrador, and I know the reality is we've been doing it. We've won the awards for it in Atlantic Canada for the last number of years. It's CBC that wins all of these at the Atlantic Journalism Awards and the RTNDA, or most of them. So I don't think there's any shying away from the courageous reporting. It's just, it's finding a new way to do it in the changing landscape that we've been talking about here.
I know the 4 of you could have another half-hour discussion about courageous reporting. You're all great examples of that. Try to get a couple of more questions in. Time is flying. Madame.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm a CBC addict, and I'm proud of it, and have been for quite a number of years. When you live down here, there's sometimes a prevailing sense of powerlessness and not being able to influence what happens in Ottawa, for example. I'd like to know how autonomous CBC is from the politics of this country. How can you risk pulling the cat's tail? Rick Mercer seems to get off with a great deal of things in his rant. How autonomous and independent is CBC of the political context in this country if it's really a national radio station?
Sir Chairman, you want to start with that, and we'll add.
First of all, the way we're set up with the government, we have total independency from the government in matters of program, budgets, everything. We run our own shop. They cannot intervene, and they don't intervene, and I've never heard that they will intervene. So there's a total wall that you can imagine that exists and is respected by both sides. From the CBC, and the government also respects totally the CBC. That's for me, I think that the...
Yeah, can I maybe add to that? What Remy is referring to is the arm's length relationship. It's been there forever. That's why, even if one of our competitors calls us constantly a state broadcaster, we are not a state broadcaster. We're clearly the public broadcaster. There's never been in my 5 years here a situation where a minister or somebody in Ottawa picked up the phone and tried to influence a story or whatever happens. Yes, we have conversations about the budget. Yes, and those conversations are constantly happening. Yes, we're called upon to move in front of hearings of committees, of different committees, whether it's heritage, whether it's finance, whether it's the Langues Officielles or whoever else in Ottawa. But that's simply being accountable. And the directors who are here are appointed, and once they're appointed on our board, and I'm sure the chairman could say that again, they don't have any accountability to Ottawa. Their accountability is to us, to CBC Radio-Canada, the management teams, the employees of CBC Radio-Canada. There's a cutoff from that moment on, because they know what the rules are and they know what the obligations of being a director in a Crown corporation is.
Just a tidbit to that, Richard, for a second, is that the government, they're they're not at play at all. The real, not danger, but the real power at play tends to be corporate, tends to be business, tends to be the business community itself. Is sort of, if there's any kind of exertion at all, indirectly even, it's maybe from some businesses, some corporations, that sort of thing. It's not overt. It's often, it can be subtle, and certainly where I work, it's at play a bit more than maybe in other areas. But even that is tepid. But the idea, if you look back over the last 30 years that I've been at CBC, all the governments never liked us. So when they were liberal and conservative, and we've always had issues in Ottawa, no matter who was in power. So as far as I'm concerned, that means you're doing a good job.
We like it, Tom, though. It's okay. Maybe there's quite a link here for the question from email. C'est pourquoi êtes-vous contre la proposition de Bell de créer une nouvelle?
Are you against the proposal of Bell to create another continuous newscast channel?
Pourquoi est-ce que vous êtes contre? On n'est pas du tout contre.
We are not against Bell.
Which is setting out a new channel. We're not against the idea of taking an advantage which becomes obligatory in so many things, to take these sort of advantages and to take all that money to better finance this new program. We can't take our new government subsidy to finance ourselves. That is completely a different entity. It's never been done in the story, in history. What we call benefits money, l'argent pour financer a particular channel. Alors, ça c'est pourquoi les gens disent, ça c'est
we would not have intervened in the Bell Astral transaction, and actually we were not officially intervening until that morning when Bell said, we're going to take some benefits money, and you know what, we're going to start this chain across the country, this network of news in French, and it's going to compete against RDI, and it's going to compete against NCN. We have no issue with the competition. We think that works, but you got to play by the rules. You can't use benefits money like we can't use our government appropriations to start funding the news networks of CBC Radio-Canada. That doesn't work.
Merci Hubert. Question de la salle.
My name is Ina, and I guess that will be the second part to the question about young specialists. I came to Canada from Ukraine to study journalism, and I know that CBC promotes multiculturalism on air. So I wonder if CBC is still interested in hiring people that come from other countries. Just asking.
It's above my pay scale.
Yes, let's go back to some of the programs that we have. Diversity is key. We think that you can't be a public broadcaster without being two things: deeply rooted in the regions and reflecting what Canada looks like in 2012, and making sure that the people who are not only in front of the camera or behind the mics, but the people that work every day at CBC Radio-Canada, they have to be a true reflection of what Canada is all about. And if you live and work and travel to certain cities in this country, they're changing. And that's to the benefit of this country, and we would like to make sure that our programs, and we have some work to do there, that our programs, capital P, not television, radio programs, that all of our programs are in tune with the diversity objectives that we have set at the level through Rue Lazarour and the People and Culture function.
I know we're going a bit into overtime here, but I think we've got another question from the floor. Sorry to my director.
No hockey. Might as well do overtime.
Sure. Yeah.
We're used to it. We're used to it.
Yeah.
Ivan Palmer from St. John's. We see pretty clearly that the government is a reluctant funder of the CBC. It raises the question in my mind. For instance, the panel is very proud of the way that CBC reporters can present Canadians to Canadians in depth, to go back on a story and so on that no other broadcaster can do. Raised the question, what? And I see that there's a wall between the government and CBC, but nevertheless,
yeah,
oh,
just
like
point
that,
your microphone.
like
Yeah.
that, popsicle style. What would the government like you to be doing? In other words, they're funding you reluctantly. You're presenting Canadians to Canadians in appropriate depth. Are they happy that you're doing that, or would they really wish you would go away?
Thank you for the question.
At CBC Radio-Canada, here's how it goes. We have a Broadcasting Act. The Broadcasting Act defines our mandate. In that mandate, there are a number of things that we need to do to be able to meet the expectations of Canadians. The funding piece has been reduced. At the end of 2015, less than 60% of our funding will come from government, which means that we will, through our own activities, continuously find and try to find new sources of financing in order to continue delivering services to Canadians. And that's a big switch from about 70% or close to high 60s a few years ago, now back down to less than 50. It'll be 58 something. Now, when we, just as an example, as a management team, with the board strategic committee and with the directors, decided that strategic direction 2015, everyone, every way, was going to be the way for us of the next 3 years, we built it, decided upon it, approved it, and then we said, here's where we're going. The only way for the government to change the mandate of CBC Radio-Canada would be to change the Act or to review the Act and the scope and the mandate and the activities of the broadcaster. We don't have these conversations, and this is where the arm's length conversation, the arm's length rule takes all of its meaning. We don't phone up the government and say, would you like us to cover this story or do this particular thing? We have a view. We interact, we hear what you want to hear about. This is why all the social media and the feedback that comes to our journalists and is then the subject of so many stories. But there's no conversation about what would you like us to do. Rémi, would you like to add to that?
I'm going to say that we've decided to be more Canadian, more regional, and more digital. We've decided that. The board, the management, the employees, the team. We've decided to go, this is our direction. We've showed this to Parliament. We showed this to the Minister of Heritage. But it was a fact. You have to understand, it's a fact. This is where we're going. When they decide to cut our budget, well, they cut everybody. First of all, you have to understand, they cut us and they cut everybody else. They cut the whole government. So we were cut like everybody else. I think that I agree with what some of you said. All governments hate the CBC because obviously, as a news organization, we do get and ask questions, and obviously politicians don't like to be asked questions. Sometimes they're uncomfortable, but this is our job, and we represent Canadians basically, and we're the public broadcaster.
But that doesn't mean that when we put out our plan and we heard our minister, James Moore, or other ministers in government say, you know what, 2015, we actually like what the broadcaster is doing. We think that is a true reflection, an incorrect reflection of what the modernization of the mandate in the Act is. We said, all right, we're in the right direction. But it wasn't, it was post facto. Remember, since 1991, the Act has not been amended. We are living with a mandate that has not been changed for over 20 years. We looked at it and we interpreted in 2012 what we think, 2011 actually, because that's when we launched it, we interpreted what that Act means and how we can make it more vibrant, more connected, and actually more alive. And this is what more Canadian, 2015, being more Canadian, more regional, more digital is all about.
Merci. One last question from the hall, please.
Bonjour. Pardon,
Oui,
bonjour.
allez-y.
Je suis de Saint-Jean.
I am from St. John's. You announced that you wish that the Francophones in Quebec continue to become more visible on radio, and do not forget the Anglophones of Quebec. I would like to know, when you have made a decision to take, how have you thought to consult the different communities or the minority groups before taking decisions which could be very difficult for it? I'll give you an example. In the region of St. John's, recently we had 3 different positions in cameraman journalists in Radio-Canada. If we have 1 or 2 of these positions, it's dramatic. We give one of these. That's certainly difficult from Montreal, perhaps, and the provinces outside of Quebec. It's really a catastrophe. I think also of our Anglophone colleagues who must have the same worries. So I wish to know if you have a particular policy as far as communication, consultation with the different linguistic communities and minority situations. We have constantly conversations which are directed and which are and led by the chief of Radio-Canada, and which also It was the person responsible for the different regions of Canada.
He was the regional director for the Atlantic region. So at the end, he was responsible for the regions, but we have panels, regional panels, and we have right through the stations conversation with the organization, Francophone organization, to get as much feedback as possible. So our connections are constant, they are organized, and they are near quasi-statutory, because it would be impossible for us to decide from the top to figure out what's good for such a region, whether it's Regina or St. John's. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our panel. Thank you very much to our management team.
Thank you, panel.
Merci beaucoup de votre participation.
Very much for your participation.
The country who's been participating to this event. If I can leave you with one message, thank you for caring about CBC and keep doing so. Merci beaucoup et bonne fin de journée.
Thank you very much and good day.